So last week, we began to talk about what it means to be the light of the world and what does the light bring, right? What does it bring to us? And we had talked about light brought clarity, light brought life through the sunlight, and how sunlight brings forth the sprouts and the things that plants and you and I need to battle sickness and whatever else. And then also the light purifies, and we had talked about how the light kills germs, how the sunlight kills germs and other things that are in the 1 inch of the top of the water. We had talked about that in the streams of the Sierra Nevada streams. John, our writer, that's been writing in John here, the first couple of chapters, scholars have determined that that's probably been written by John the Baptist. And then after that is probably John, the son of Zebedee. And so in the context, John the Baptist sees Jesus as the true Messiah. He sees him as the Lamb. He sees him as this great deliverer of all the spiritual context that the people have been living in for so long. And John sees Jesus as the true Messiah. Sure, we know that John doubts a little bit later on, and it's because he's in prison and in a really hard time for himself, as we all do, right? I mean, there's times and moments in our lives that we doubt who Jesus is because maybe we're in a hard situation in life, and we are afraid, and out of fear, we begin to doubt who we are putting our trust in. And so John is trying to help us to understand that Jesus is over all those things. And the light himself brings forth this renewed moment in our lives, our spiritual lives. Maybe not in our physical lives, but certainly in our spiritual lives. And that this light brings forth kind of the evidence in our lives of whatever it might be. There's a darkness that we've lived in before, or there's things that the light exposes so that we can see what's true. And if you've ever done this in your bedroom or whatever when you were little, many of us slept with night lights on, I'm sure. But some liked it dark. If you heard a noise, you would grab the flashlight and look over in the corner or wherever it was. Do this camping too when you're out in the stars and out in the, out, and you hear a big noise outside. You click on the light. Why? So that you can see the evidence of everything, whether you're going to get eat or not. You can see what's coming towards you, right? So light brings forth a lot of these things. It brings forth clarity. It brings forth life. It brings forth purity. Today we're going to pick up with the fourth idea that John brings forth, and that is that light brings forth joy. And we're going to touch on this in just a minute. But I wanted to review or kind of look at our scripture this morning again in John 1 through 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, by his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. This has been the words of God for the people of God. So light brings joy. What does this mean for our lives? What does this mean in maybe understanding what Jesus was doing and what Jesus' life and what he brought to us? When there are long periods without sunshine, people become depressed. How many of you really enjoyed the sunshine this morning? I know. I felt it too. One of the things I love after a big storm is to walk out and just to enjoy the sunlight on my face. Not that I hate the rain, I don't. I really enjoy the rain. But there is these breaks that we get, and God's very, very intention. The other day, I went to go pick up Macy from football tryouts, softball tryouts, and as I'm going, I see this massive rainbow, and it was beautiful, beautiful, solid, and just so the colors were so just vibrant, and I was reminded of the promise from God, right? And there's a break in the storm. It's kind of the same context that where John sees this, that there's a break in the storm, and this break brings forth this light that is just amazing to us, that it warms us, it rejuvenates us. You see, folks that live in Western Oregon or Western Washington, Washington State, and then in Southern England also would probably attest to this. Right, Amelia? Where there's lots of cloudy and foggy weather conditions that extend for long periods of time, there's actually a clinical condition that folks attach themselves to. It's called the seasonal affective disorder. SAD, right? It's called SAD. People with SAD are effectively treated by going into artificially lit rooms called sunrooms that they reflect sun on them, right? The light mimics sunlight and decreases the brain's production of melatonin. Some of us take melatonin so that we can sleep at night because it relaxes the brain, right? Well, that's one of the things that causes depression. So when we have lots of cloudy days and lots just overcastness, our melatonin in our bodies kick into a higher position and we just feel lazy and don't want to. This is why you feel like you don't want to go out and do anything, right? But that's the same condition of SAD. And so they've created these sunrooms so that you go in a sunroom and that the light is reflected on you. This hasn't done this in a while. Anyway. Isaiah in 60:20 says, "Your sun will set no more, neither will your moon wane, for you will have the Lord for an everlasting light, and the days of your mourning will be finished." Isaiah had this idea, and maybe a better understanding, that God brought forth the light to bring us to a new place. You know, when we are awakened to Jesus, when we're awakened to this moment in our lives where we really begin to see the light, a lot of things in our lives begin to be exposed. We're able to remove those things. We're able to kind of recognize what that looks like. And as we do, then the renewing of our spirits, renewing of our souls come through the revelation of light in our lives. There's good reason why people have had trouble discovering true and lasting happiness. The problem is that the nature of happiness depends on what happens. Get this? Happiness happens, right? So for us, we've been conditioned in our lives that happiness, circumstances bring happiness. So whatever happens brings forth happiness. Well, this is not true for the Bible. This is not how the Bible really talks about what it means to be joyful, right? So what people really want is a happiness that lasts forever, right? And so we're always looking for the next thing. What's going to make me happy? Well, we'll go to Disneyland 3 or 4 times a year. What's going to make me? Well, we'll just have a family functions every week. This is what makes us happy. Or I'll get a better job. I'll get more money because that's what's going to make me happy. More money. I'll get a bigger house because that's what's going to make me happy. The thing is this is not the way the Bible talks about this. Matter of fact, the Bible doesn't talk about being happy. The Bible talks about being joyful. The Bible talks about having or receiving joy. Joy is a deeper and more abiding than happiness. It's a deeper feeling. It's more than a feeling. It's a deeper rooted position in your soul and your being. If we have Jesus, then we should recognize maybe what that joy looks like. Joy is something that the Lord gives to us when we receive him. It is a mark of someone who has been truly redeemed when we can find joy in the hard things of life, in the hard decisions, or whatever it might be. We will find joy in these things. D.L. Moody writes this: happiness is caused by things that happen around me, and circumstances will mar it. But joy flows right on through trouble. Joy flows on through the dark. Joy flows on, all through persecution and opposition. It is an unceasing fountain bubbling up in the heart, a secret spring the world can see and doesn't know anything about. The Lord gives his people perpetual joy when they walk in obedience to him. Joy comes from the knowledge that you are right with the Lord. It comes from knowing that he is your loving and loyal friend and not your angry enemy. It comes from the knowledge that your life each day has an exalted purpose, that there's something that you're created for, that there's someone who you're created for and with. It comes from an experience of Christ working through you to bless the lives of others around you. You ever get that feeling like when you've helped someone, or when whether it be maybe it's monetarily, or maybe it's just through service, and there's just this overwhelming joy that you get out of that, and you're walking away from that situation going, wow, that was a great day. It wasn't a great day because you were happy. It was a great day because the revelation of joy became very real to you in that moment of service. I read something actually just this morning about how the church tends to have all these leadership conferences. When the Bible only speaks about leadership about 60 times in the Bible. But do you know what it speaks more of? Servanthood. 900 times the Bible speaks about servanthood. So should we have leadership conferences or servanthood conferences? What should we do? What should we go to? But it's because of this whole context of joy, right? There's a joy in this. There's a joy about serving our brother and sister. There's a joy about serving people and doing this. That's part of who we are. That's just part of our makeup. In sum, it comes from fellowshipping with him, Jesus, and bathing in Jesus in his light each and every day. Are we bathing in the light of Christ every single day? The next thing that I think that John wants us to discover in this is that light brings security. Are you afraid of the dark? Some of us are. I know as a child, I was afraid of the dark. I did not like a dark room. I had to have a nightlight on anywhere I was. And even then, I wasn't that secure, right? Many people and children alike, many of us have a nightlight in our rooms or in our houses. How many of you had a nightlight in your houses right now? Yeah, so you don't run into things? We do too. I have one in the hallway. There was an article that I read not too long ago about an interview with Stephen King. Now, you know who Stephen King is? He's an author of a lot of horror books, right? And eventually movies. Yeah, I'm using Stephen King in my sermon this morning. Yes, you can be glad about that. Stephen King, a best-selling author of many tales of horror. In the interview, he talked about his daily writing routine. He said that he only writes when? In the morning. Fascinating, right? When he was asked whether he ever wrote at night, he replied, "Are you kidding me? Have you read the things that I write? Have you read this stuff? Because I would not be writing it at night." Why? Because apparently even Stephen King has a fear of the dark, right? There's this natural fear to us. We're afraid of the dark. But the thing about light is that it dispels fear. It penetrates it. There is no way. Darkness can never overcome the light, ever. It just doesn't happen. It can't do it. It provides us, light provides us with a security. That's why we light our streets at night. This is why we have street lights on the ends of our streets or wherever you might live. This is why you light the outside of your home, right? Whenever we in Loomis, we get this little text that comes up periodically from the sheriff's department if something's going awry in our town, which it's funny that a lot of things just kind of happen in Loomis. It's weird, but the small town and people show up there. It's kind of weird. But something comes on, and the very first thing that comes to my mind is to light the outside of my house. Why? Because burglars won't approach a lit house. They just won't do it. So you light the outside. So light dispels fear. It gives us the reality of what's happening and what's going on. When you have Jesus, the true light in our life, you do not need to fear anything per se. And again, this kind of goes back to the whole joy piece. What does Christ bring forth to us? And in joy, right? There's a security of having joy with him. Why is this different? I think we can mistake the security with other things. But one of the things that I feel like this kind of exposes is this idea of what happens to us when we leave this planet. When someone passes away, what's the fear? Right? Because we're all going to ask this question when it's our time to leave this planet. What are we afraid of? Is it afraid of leaving the planet? Or is it afraid of leaving family? What is the fear here? The light with Christ actually brings a security to us in that the things of the physical world that are temporal, now we see an eternal place to live, an eternal place to be and to dwell. And the fear is expelled by the context that we believe that Jesus is real. We believe that Christ brings us to this place with him, not only on the earth, but also in the place of eternal. Hebrews 13, 5-6 says, "Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Because God has said, 'Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you.'" Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So we say with confidence, "The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me?" So the Hebrew writer understands that Jesus is never going to leave you, is never going to forsake you. And these are promises that are made. In 2 Thessalonians 3:3, it says, "But the Lord is faithful, and he will strengthen and protect you from the evil one." It is the job of the shepherd to guard his sheep. Jesus' intention is to guard us every single day. And in John 10, it says this, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me, and I give eternal life to them, and they shall never perish, and no one shall snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand." See, Jesus desires us. The security is found in him and in him alone. That he has crossed the boundaries both of temporal and eternal. That he was here as fully human and understands, and he is fully God and understands the eternal as well. So he's merged these two places together. The final thing that I want to bring up this morning that I feel like John is maybe trying to help us to understand is that light brings hope. For good reason, light has been a symbol of hope for ages. Think of a sense of hope when we feel when we see the dawn's first light. Years ago, when I was a youth pastor, we used to have all-nighters. Hate those things. But we'd have an all-nighter on New Year's Eve to New Year's Day, and we'd have, a couple of hundred students in our building, and we'd have this upper hallway, and we had the guys' room way down at this end and the girls' room way down at this end. And then we'd have all kinds of games. We're trying to keep youth busy all night long, right? So this is with 200 students. It's quite a deal. So it's outside games, inside games, a moment of worship, a moment of it's just all these things that are going on. All night long, you're steering youth, and you're trying to keep the guys out of the girls' room. It was never the girls trying to get into the guy. It's bizarre, but I was always trying to keep the guys out of the girls' room. And I'm the police, so I'm walking the halls like the whole time. I could not wait for dawn to appear. I'm just telling you. I could not wait for the first glimpse of sunlight that would come up, because I'm like, cleanup time, let's do it. Let's get out of here, right? Because I was exhausted. I imagine you have the same kind of story sometime when you could not wait for the first dawn of light. There's some nights that I've been in the wilderness that I can't wait for the first light of dawn, because it is like noise after noise, or something's happening. There was once when I took a youth group backpacking, and we're sitting next to a lake, and it was the first night was fantastic, but the next night was terrible. We set up tents, we had a fire going, it was really good. My brother and I, Cameron, my little brother, who was like this big, we went and we hung the food. As we're hanging the food, because you hang the food in the wilderness, right? So the bears don't get into it. As we're hanging the food, I can hear growls coming up the canyon. And I am thinking, this is going to be a long night. And I mean, it hadn't even got dark yet. And we quickly hung it up. We wrapped it around the tree. We did all the things that we needed to do. And I'm thinking, well, if anything, they're going to get our food, right? And we hung the food a good probably 50 yards away. So we're like, there's no way they're going to mess with us. We sit down. We're in the camping area. We're surrounded by these big boulders. And our tents are set inside, and we have a fire going, and we're telling stories. And I'm responsible for these youth. Like we have about 6 youth with us, and I'm responsible for them. And then all of a sudden I hear growls, and I'm thinking, why are they coming here? Why don't they go to the food? And then there's one, then it's one growl here, and then there's one growl over here, and then there's one growl behind us. And I'm going, what is happening here? Right? So I start to freak out. And all night long, guess what I'm doing? Stoking the fire, stoking the fire, stoking the fire. So I feel like, man, all night long, it was work. It was making sure the fire was there, and they wouldn't come in when the fire was there. But as soon as the fire started to go out, they'd approach, and you could hear them approach. And there was like 3 or 4 bears. I'm thinking, why is this happening to me? But I could not wait for what? The light to shine. As soon as the light shined, it exposed all things, and there was hope. I was going to survive, right? And these kids were going to survive. So that was a nerve-wracking moment. But it's those moments where I think John is helping us to see, look, Jesus brings life. He brings hope to something that we feel like is completely dead or there's no purpose. But he brings purpose. He brings life to this. In John 11:25 and 26, it says, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And this question just jumps out from Jesus. Do you believe this? Church, this is a great question for us. Do you believe this? Do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection? He is the life. He is the hope of all life. He's the hope of all life. Caitlin and I just spent some time in Mendocino a few weekends ago. It was really great. We went to one of my favorite things to do is to go and see lighthouses. I think they're fascinating. I think whoever thought about this, just the structure of it. And if you think about what a lighthouse does, it's not just some building that sits on the edge of the ocean that casts a light, right? But there's all kinds of things. There's hope to a lighthouse. There's security to the lighthouse. I mean, we could be talking about a lighthouse this morning, right? Because it helps folks to see, or the captains of these ships to see that there is danger in the water or danger nearby or land is approaching, for the hope of, hey, we've just had a really hard night on the ocean. Where's the lighthouse to give us hope? We can see it from miles out. Jesus is the embodiment of hope. Hope of salvation, hope of righteousness, hope of peace. But the greatest hope that Jesus gives is that which pertains after we leave this world. Perhaps you have heard of the famous poet and short story novelist O. Henry. His real name is William Sidney Porter. When Sidney Porter was laying in his bed dying, he asked and called out to his nurse, "Pull back the shades, Mary. I'm afraid to go home in the dark." There's something about light that just brings hope. Something about light that brings hope to us. While on maneuvers, this battleship was approaching, and he looked out and noted a light in the dark, foggy night. After noting the light's coordinates, the captain recognized his ship was on a collision course with another vessel. The captain instructed, signal the ship, we are on a collision course, advise you change course 20 degrees. The return signal countered, advisable for you to change course 20 degrees. The captain signaled again, I am a captain, change course 20 degrees. The response was, I'm a seaman, second class. You'd better change course 20 degrees. By this time, the captain is what? Absolutely furious. His signal curtly ordered, I'm a battleship, change your course 20 degrees. The reply, I'm a lighthouse, you make the call. Right? John 8:12, Jesus spoke, saying, I am the light of the world. Who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have light. It is in the heart that we respond to who Jesus Christ is. When the heart that was once in darkness becomes open to Jesus Christ, his light shines in the darkness. His light also shines as to how we once lived in a dark time. When we are awakened to Jesus, we either receive him as a visitor or we receive him as a permanent resident in our lives. When Jesus dwells in our hearts, minds, and souls, he becomes our Lord, and all darkness is exposed, and the light begins to heal and make right once again.